Yes.
All right.
Did it get you on?
We okay?
We can push it out faster.
Call to order a meeting of the South Carolina Commission of Disabilities. I also want to mention that we will not be going into executive session after today's meeting. So, Mary Ellen, could you give us the welcome?
Sure. A news release announcing the date, time, and place of the May 17th, 2018 Commission meeting was mailed May 15th. Appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office, video conference locations, and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistants, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Also, could you do the invocation?
Sure. Bow your heads. Lord, we come to you today asking for your guidance and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion and allow us to work together as a group. Fill us with your wisdom as we make decisions that will affect the special needs community. And continue to remind us that all we do here today is for the pursuit of truth and for the service of the citizens of South Carolina. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Thank you. May I have the introduction of guests? Can I start up in the front, right, the IT guy right behind there? I can see him. Okay, great, thank you.
Good morning, Jen Dalton, CDSN.
Ben Orner, DSN.
John Cooper, DDSN.
Right.
Heather Person or something. Captain Roberts Wilson Parents Club and South Carolina Parent and parent of two deceased children that served for over 30 years with the center.
Thank you.
Bob Jones with Pride Center of the Newberry County Disability Sports.
Carly Fieldhouse, the Arc of South Carolina. Washington Foundation, serving the autism community.
Heather Waddell, Tri-Development Center of Aiken County. Stephanie Williams, Calhoun County DSM Board.
Mike McCall's Calhoun County Disabilities and Special Needs Board.
Lynn Sig, DDSN. Susan Davis, USC Center for Disability Resources.
Fungi with Bright Star.
Hayes Davis Protection Advocacy for People with Disabilities.
Dorothy Goodwin, Community Options. Yeah.
Jerry Miles, Oconee DSN.
Boyd Warren, Babcock Center.
Caroline Newton, Brain Injury Association of South Carolina, and mother of a brain injury survivor.
And Joyce Davis, Brain Injury Association of South Carolina.
Kevin Ducote, DSN.
Kathleen Lynn, Aging with Blair.
Dave Fiorini, DHS.
Melissa Ritter, DSN.
Thank you and welcome, so glad to have you. May I have the adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. The approval of the minutes of April 19th, 2018 Commission meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Deborah McPherson, I can't see you behind the podium, but welcome.
At last month's commission meeting, Mr. Malley reported that House Bill 4013 was dead. When Ms. Unum questioned why the legislation did not even get out of the House Judiciary Committee, Mr. Malley responded that he didn't know why, but the proposed legislation was not controversial. No, something's going on. There we go. He reiterated that it was DDSN's position that it still has authority to be making healthcare decisions for individuals with disabilities unable to consent when family members are not able or willing to make these decisions. This legislation had far more reaching implications in decision-making than just medical appointments. Mr. Malley must not have been aware that many parents and private providers contacted members of the House Judiciary Committee expressing their concerns regarding this proposed legislation. I and two other former DDSN commissioners sent a letter on April 13th to the Governor and Attorney General expressing our concerns regarding House Bill 4013 and DDSN's internal legal opinion regarding the Adult Healthcare Consent Act and South Carolina Code 442650. We also expressed concerns that DDSN's Directive 53507DD, which the Commission voted to amend in July 2017, has never been posted on DDSN's website informing the public of its actions. Deputy Attorney General Barry Bernstein informed the three former commissioners that he had spoken with Mr. Malley, and it was agreed that an opinion should be sought from the State Attorney General's office. Mr. Bernstein informed us that it was also agreed that Directive 53507 would be updated on DDSN's website. And finally, it was agreed that DDSN would not support any future legislative changes that would place DDSN above family members in making healthcare decisions for individuals with disabilities who are unable to consent. The Commission should inquire as to whether DDSN has followed up to request an Attorney General's opinion as to whether its current policy complies with the Act. Directive 53507 posted on DDSN's website is one from 2014, not 2017. I'm requesting the Commission seek an Attorney General's opinion regarding the authority to make healthcare decisions and ensure that Directive 53507 is updated and that the agency brings its practices in compliance with revisions in the Act, which deleted any authority DDSN once had to make healthcare decisions for persons unable to consent. Finally, I've spoken previously about my concerns regarding service reductions being made through the review of service plans by the newly created Waiver Administration Division. 2 months ago, I submitted 11 questions to DDSN staff requesting a written response. I met with Ms. Beck and Mr. Orner following last month's commission meeting. However, my questions were again not fully answered. I was told in our meeting that service coordinators have always used a new Waiver Administration Division. The revised assessment instrument does not appear to be standardized. Following our meeting, I asked Ms. Beck to send me a copy of the revised PCA instrument as well as the one being used prior to its revision. When my request was ignored, I contacted a private provider who emailed me the current instrument. In my conversation with this well-respected provider, I learned that this provider also had concerns that services are consistently being reduced by the Waiver Administration Division staff. This provider expressed concerns that some staff in the Waiver Administration Division have no prior case management experience and have no personal knowledge experience of the needs of individuals with disabilities and their families for which this provider provides case management services. I've heard these complaints from other counties. I was later able to obtain a copy of the PCA instrument used prior to January 2008 from a parent. After comparing the two PCA instruments, I noticed that the 17 personal care task questions were basically the same with very little changes, but the recommended hours assigned to the scoring has been revised. As in the past, the higher the score, the greater the need for assistance with personal care tasks. The revised instrument indicates that a score of 33 or higher can be attained for the personal task section. However, it appears there's no way possible to score 33 or higher. It's like taking a test, there's no way to make 100. The hours recommended for a score of 0 to 6 remain the same. A score of 7 to 12 was reduced from 2 to 1.5 hours. A score of 13 to 18 was reduced from 3 to 2 hours. A score of 19 to 25 was reduced from 4 to 2.5 hours. A score of 26 to 32 was reduced from 5 to 3 hours, and a score of 33 or more was reduced from 6 to 3.5 hours. But as I indicated, there appears to be impossible to receive a score of 33 or more on the revised instrument for personal tasks, so the maximum number of hours for the personal task section is 3 hours versus 6 hours on the prior version of the instrument. I question the basis for the reduction of these hours if the needs of the individual have not changed. It appears that the scoring of the instrument was revised by some unknown person or persons without public review or promulgation of regulations to ensure that the numbers of hours recommended are within the waiver caps that were put in place in 2010, purportedly because of budgetary reasons, but not necessarily based on the hours needed to perform the task assessed. In some cases, it appears the services are being reduced even below the caps put in place in 2010. When I met with Ms. Beck, I asked whether families had been informed of the 2014 Court of Appeals ruling that prohibits DDSN from imposing caps where the participant is at risk of institutionalization. She assured me that case managers have been instructed that caps may be exceeded, but individuals with disabilities and their families have not been informed of this ruling. Ms. Beck indicated that these requests must be made to DHHS. To date, the public and case managers have not been provided with standards being used to exceed the caps. If individuals with disabilities at risk of institutionalization, their family have not been informed that additional hours above these hours recommended using the revised instrument can be requested through DHHS, then the health and safety of the waiver participants as well as their families may be placed at risk. These service reductions may prevent some individuals from remaining at home with their families or not provided adequate support in caring for their family member. The Commission needs to investigate why these service reductions are being made on the instrument that appears to have hours arbitrarily assigned to its scoring. The Commission also should investigate whether notices being provided when services are being reduced comply with the process. It appears the reason given to waiver participants is the DSN reduction, which does not explain the justification for reducing hours. A staff member in the Waiver Administration Division responded recently to a case manager that service reductions go into effect immediately with no prior notice, which is clear violation of the requirements of the Medicaid Act and due process. This is just one of many examples of the failure of DDSN to comply with the directives of the General Assembly to provide the supports needed to serve waiver participants in the least restrictive setting, and in some cases results in lawsuits. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any commissioners' updates?
I don't have anything formal or anything, but I wanted to say that years ago, some of you might remember that in Oconee County, we had a certificate program with Tri-County Technical College, and at the end of the 6 months, every employee got a raise, and they became seen more like paraprofessionals. So I'm proud to say that Oconee and Anderson and Pickens are again going to do a certificate program. This time there'll be more participants because there'll be 3 counties participating. And Director Bailey has met with the group, and they're collaborating beautifully. They meet again in 2 weeks to reestablish updated commission curriculum, and college credits will be awarded to these people. So I think that's huge. So that I know that when I was doing this program, our turnover dropped from like 38% to 8%. It was incredible, the results. And then now, you know, we have the critical incidents on the rise, and the only way to, there's no magic bullet for that, but it can only help to train people consistently. So they're in the early infancy stages of trying to reestablish a very significant training program that I hope will end up being a statewide initiative, because I think it will resolve that turnover thing. I've seen it happen, so I know for sure that it is very likely to influence in a good way. And right now we're at crisis stage and turnover everywhere, but I know that this approach definitely works. So I want to commend Jerry Mize in Oconee and Geraldine King in Anderson and Elaine Tina in Pickens for, you know, I always said all the best ideas come from the providers because they're the ones out there doing the work. So I wish them every success. I know it's going to be a lot of hard work. I think it'll be well worth it, and they want to try to go live in August. So I think that'd be great.
That's wonderful. That's fabulous. So glad to hear it. Anybody else have anything to say?
I guess I'll just report on the autism insurance bill that we discussed last time. Unfortunately, I appreciate the commissioner's support in sending a letter to the Senate. The bill died when the Senate adjourned, when the legislature adjourned recently. That bill, as you recall, was to close the gaps in South Carolina's autism insurance coverage to bring our state in line with the majority of other states, and it died without ever receiving a vote in the Senate. We could not get it on the agenda for a vote. So very disappointing for the state, but I appreciate y'all's support.
Anything else? All right, we have asked Sam Broughton and Gary Lamel and Vicki Thompson to be part of the nominating committee for the officers for next year. So I hope they will work on this, and they will report in June, correct? Okay, great, thank you. Can I have, Pat, could you give us the state director's report?
Sure. First of all, I'll just echo what the Commissioner Thompson said about the initiative up in the upstate, and I'll throw Tyler Rex was part of the initial thinking, and he has moved to Greenville. In today's presentation about abuse and neglect, a big part of it's going to be addressing what's driving that inching up? And a big part of that is the capabilities of our direct care workers. And so I'll tease that out to a much greater extent. And nationally, one of the top solutions is to come up with a certification program to professionalize it. And we talked a little about standardizing training, but when I was there, I thought it was like an initial meeting, and I left there. I mean, they're really ready to go. They've done this with other manufacturers. Their candidate pool is a pool that will stay. They attract adults, not people right out of high school, who are underemployed, who are motivated. It just seemed like a win-win across the board. So I applaud the upstate for pushing that forward. Just a couple things just to close the loop. Deborah, thanks for raising those issues. Our directive on the adult health care is up on the webpage for comment. You're welcome to do it, and we've sent it out to providers. As far as the AG opinion, Barry Bernstein raised the idea. I thought it was a great idea. Just have an independent assessment of it. And it takes about 3 months, although I think with Deborah's persuasion, it might be sooner. So we sent that over there 10 days ago, and they're going to take a look at that. And also, when it comes back, I think my opinion is going to reaffirm what we're doing. It's also going to urge us to go ahead and solidify legislation so that there's no ambiguity as to what we're doing. And so I think that's all in the direction of goodness. On the waiver service, I tried to get up the PowerPoint that Ben provided in February. And if you haven't seen it, look at it. It's very compelling about the due diligence and fairness of the process. I think if we've done, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, we've done 8,800 at the time of your PowerPoint, and we ended up having 20 consumers with their.
Ben, raise your hand so people know who you are.
With their, give me some quick numbers.
As of the end of, or beginning of May, it was 15,000 total, and we're still looking at the same, about 5% are being reduced or denied at some point due to the assessments and the turnover of the reinforcement of policies, but it's the same. The percentages and everything are consistent with the presentation that we gave.
And then when they appeal, how much of that 5%?
I haven't looked at those numbers, but it's
goes down. Yes. Anyway, we're being diligent. There's a lot of equities in how we spend our money and people on the waiting list. And we have a lot of case managers out there that are young, inexperienced, lack training. And quite frankly, one of the biggest benefits of our program is to help the case managers with their processes. So I welcome us to look at it again. I personally had our team present the entire process to HHS because this is our one authorization service. They have tons of authorization services. They do this all the time. And they looked at our system and they didn't see an issue, but we're always welcome to look at it again. But I can assure you we're not negligent in considering the fairness and equities of everybody involved. So we will take a look at it, Deborah. Thank you. Mercer Healthcare Consultants has been selected by HHS's contract. They're on contract, and they're going to start the payment system and rate study review in the first week of June. And it was tentative. They're going to come on site. They're going to interview people, and they're going to start the stakeholder meetings, and that process will go from there. So we are in the starting gate, and we're ready to start the game. But I think that's a big accomplishment for us to bring just a fair rate to make sure our system is healthy, and we check ourselves. And I think that will play a role in the abuse and neglect as well, as I'll talk about a little bit later. I want to just inform the commission that this last month we've been spending a lot of time on the final rule workshops. We've talked about that a lot for the number of years, but we are right down to actually in the implementation phase. And it's consumed most of our time this month from the policy side. And we've identified the discrete components that the providers have interest in clarification on, and we're holding a discrete workshop on each one, and we're providing a written document as to best practices and feedback. And certainly, this is a developmental process for how to implement this, because at the federal level, they're giving us policies. They're not giving us procedures. We're making some of these procedures, and we got to make it in a very reasonable, practical manner to have this system to be adopted. And at the end of the day, you know, we're protecting our consumers' rights and choice. and people can look at it from different optics, but I think the more we look at it, the more we come together on that center line of this is a shift, but it's not a dramatic shift. And we got to build our procedures so that we do these within our capabilities. And today, when I talk about abuse and neglect, and I talk about the direct care worker, I think it's going to raise questions as to if we have our challenges today, how are our direct care workers going to handle increased responsibility with final rule? And it is an increase on their capabilities to implement the final rule. So I don't think we can keep on piling on the front line without being more judicious in staffing levels and capabilities, because it's starting to fray, and the final rule is just another brick in the backpack of a direct care worker who's already stressed. And so when the providers have interest, I'm trying to understand a lot of their concerns, and I would be if I'm them, I'm concerned as well, because it's challenging to hire, retain, and develop a staff to do what we expect them to do, and that's a big part of it.
In what ways does the final rule increase the responsibility of the direct care worker?
I think this is from a layman, so I'll have Susan correct me when she can. Our direct care worker is a full service person, has many skills required from the safety, the care, custody, control, and often we forget about the habilitation skills that we expect of them. And habilitation skills, it takes a lot of I call experience. It's leadership in a not everybody has that skill. And so now with final rule, now we're in a position to where we're modifying person-centered plans, we're restricting rights, we got the paperwork component of it all, and then we have the direct care worker has to implement for consumers who may have different plans doing different things. So you're making these risk decisions during the day. Is it within his plan? And so I think it's just more judgments are going to be needed by the direct care worker in a compressed time frame with all their other duties. So I think it just adds legitimate risk to them fulfilling this additional responsibility. Jerry, what do you think? Is that close enough? Okay.
I mean, a good example of that is you can have their right is to have anything they want to out of the refrigerator. But their rehabilitation plan says that since they weigh 400 pounds, they should stick with a certain diet. You're a direct care worker and you've got to persuade that to happen.
That's exactly right.
And that's just the most graphic way I can describe it.
I think, I completely agree that the weight we put on their shoulders is enormous. What I wasn't clear on is how the final rule even intensifies that burden that they carry. I mean, I know some of what the final rule does, but I wasn't sure how it directly.
Well, and don't even get started on the fence thing, but if you take it down, the direct care workers, what are they going to do? You don't go in the road. I mean, that's just, we're putting them in a bad position in some cases, and we've got to work our way through that so that they don't have more responsibility than they're going to crack under.
And however, of course, the regulations do account for maintaining health and safety. We don't want to jeopardize that. So the issue with people who need fences or who need health-related decisions about access to food, there's a process to do that. So there is not an inherent risk of just, kind of an open system, but there's a process that has to go about it, because you're then infringing on a person's rights that they really have always had. It's not like new rights are being introduced. It's just regulating it more finely, because now it's tied to continued funding.
Right. Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yep, that does.
And one last comment on the final workshops is the last workshop is going to be, we spent a lot of time based on provider feedback to create a framework, which we're going to send them to and draft before the workshop. Because what we're really trying to do is just to make sure that their policies are in line. And a lot of this comes from HHS had an external audit of 1,000 residential settings. I mean, it was pretty extensive. And they identified either, finding or deficiencies that didn't answer these questions. But we've developed some level of reasonable scale that if you score about 80 or above, there's an assumption your policy's working, your training's working, and you just might need to fine tune it. If it's less than 80%, we're going to be looking for the policies and the training. And that's the vast majority, to make sure our policies and training are in the starting gate before December 31st. And then we certainly have the fence issues that we have to individually address, and then the co-location issues. And again, we've talked a lot about co-location. Hopefully we've got it down to where it's, it's adjacent property. We're not looking to close down houses, but we are doing our due diligence to make sure these various settings that have some more isolating than others have mitigated some of the risks that these consumers have access to the community. So we're going through that process, and the way we're going to do it is we're going to get rid of all the extraneous stuff and have them focus on those areas, and then we'll get on them as quickly as we can. And things that we look short, we'll hit the field and we'll tighten up them where we are. But we will get people through the process. It's just we got to make sure we have the substance of change as opposed to just more paper. So we're really streamlining that approach. I'm going to update you on the case management initiative to move to market rates. Nothing's really changed from last time, other than we're working on some billing training, and we can take on June 9th at the next commission meeting. I will be able to tell you the month of May will be the first cycle that we can measure from beginning to end as to the increase in case managers' billing proficiency, in order to see if they can adjust close the revenue gap based on the lower rates. And I think there's ample room to do it. The question is, how much can they do physically? And that'll give us a good litmus test as to the issues we're confronting. So at the next commission meeting, we'll have that data, and then we'll move that down the road. But I've heard no word from HHS. They're letting us develop our systems and get our adjustments to the market rate, and they're not flipping the switch prematurely to jolt our system. And the last thing I want to cover is Rufus Britt is the interim state director for Dave. And before I go one more step, I'm going to say, Dave, this is Dave's last commission meeting. And I want to personally thank Dave for all of his leadership and guidance and education to me. I tell you what, this is a very complex business, and there's not a lot of rules. It's a lot of judgment, and Dave has been fabulous to all of us, and he's the guy behind the scenes that kind of keeps the knowledge moving forward. And it's a big gap, Dave, really is a big gap when you're leaving. But anyway, I'm gonna give you a round of applause for Rufus picked up the ball, and his first project is we just gotta treat the direct care shortages at the regional centers like we're on a wartime footing. We've got to fix it. And our first strategy is a short-term strategy. We've come to the conclusion, which I've come to the conclusion, is absent a recession, we're always going to be that 10% short. We just can never quite get there. And then we have to burden our staff with overtime, and then we have a bad month, it's double overtime. And what has worked in the past is we have gone to temp agencies, and they attract people that we cannot attract because they're paying cash. They're not paying the benefits. And so the problem in the past is when we use that, we get that, and when we turn that on, it works surprisingly well. The problem is we turn that on, and then we turn our head, and 6 months later we blow the budget because we're overstaffed. So what Rufus is tasked to do is, and we've been working on good measurements so we really can measure all the resources we're putting in that fight so that we can stay at our staffing level, and so that as the temps come up, the overtime needs to come down so that we keep a level budget. And it's going to take greater systems and greater management and greater discipline. But I'm confident with those things, we can get that to a 101, 102% level without blowing the budget. And then from there, we have to look for long-term solutions. And that's where Vicki Upstate's idea is. We were at a provider meeting, and some providers are going to tier systems. Department of Mental Health has a tier system for their direct care worker to give them some career opportunities. Because if you're getting the same, $11, whether you're there a day or 20 years, it's not. There's something about that. So I think we have to start thinking long-term solutions as well. And it's just one of those things where if that gets away from us, that would be catastrophic, because that's our main business and our main risk. So it's all on Rufus's shoulders now. All right. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you very much. Dave, we're going to miss you. Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
All right, Vicki Thompson, could you give us an update on the state director search?
Okay, we've had 116 applicants, very qualified, group of people have applied. We're very fortunate to have some exceptional people to consider. And, we will interview on June the 10th. 20th. Thank you, Gary.
The 20th,
June
the
the
10th or the 20th? That's 20th.
For the next commission meeting. And I don't know any more than that. I don't know how long or how many or, all that yet.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
All right. Joan Cooper.
I want to say one thing for Joan, step right up. I just want to warm her up, and that is, this is Joan's first time here, and we thank you for presenting the details. A couple of months ago, when we presented the capital account, and at the time you were looking at about $8.6 million, and there was questions about why do we have so much money in there, how do we spend it, and there are some logistical and multi-year projects in there, but it got us thinking about our historical process of locking up a lot of preventative maintenance money in capital accounts. That gives us not enough latitude. And we do, so my point is, right now, we have approximately $13 million in 2 accounts that are in the capital fight. And what we're going to do is, over the next month, we're going to go through, and we do need, I think, probably anywhere from 7 to 9 million to have multi-year capabilities, but we really do, we're going to squeegee that out. And what Joan did this year is she took all the projects that we might normally capitalize, and we're using our existence maintenance accounts to draw them down. So we're trying to right-size that and get that cash. I'm not saying what we're going to do with that cash, but we certainly got to get it so that we can have access to it if we need it. And the main reason we're thinking about it is because we're coming to the year end, and as much as you guys like to spend every penny, it makes me nervous, and we need cash reserve. So anyway, so we'll have that solved, but she's just going to take care of this month, and all these projects are focused on just capital projects without preventive maintenance.
Okay, I'm here to request commission approval of 5 projects for the fiscal year 18-19 Comprehensive Permanent Improvement Plan. The first one on the list is the campus security, and this would cover gates at Midland Center and Coastal Center. The project scope includes controlling vehicular access and restricting unauthorized access to Midland Center and Coastal Center, limiting access to a single gate, possibly extending fencing as appropriate, altering the entrance driveway for queuing and turnaround, installing an automatic drop arm gate that's activated with photo badges or a call-in for visitors, installing surveillance cameras at the gate area, running conduit for network communications and power lines to the gate and camera locations, and installing a security control panel at the campus security office for monitoring by the OD clerk. Our second project is the HVAC systems replacement for Coastal Center Hillside Dorms 320 and 420. The scope of the work for this project for 2 dormitories includes replacement of the chiller, boiler, and fan coils with new VRF split system and DX ventilation unit. The work will include related electrical remediation and other associated repairs. Third project is roof repairs and replacement for Coastal Center, the admin B1 and B2, Centerview H2, H3, H4, and 9. The project scope includes roofing replacement and repairs at the following Coastal Center buildings, which I just listed. Roof surfaces have been surveyed and identified to be at the end of life cycle and should be replaced with new roofing. The roofs include both low slope and slope roofing surfaces. And the fourth project is HVAC system replacement for the Witten Center Hallett School Auditorium. The scope of the work for this project includes a new split system heat pump air conditioning unit with auxiliary hot water heating coil, and associated renovations required to support the HVAC work. And the fifth project is the demolition of the Witten Center Super Building. The project scope includes demolition of 44,330 square foot dormitory building that was abandoned due to condition more than 10 years ago.
Does anybody have any questions? Yes, go ahead.
On the, did we need any capital improvement money for the high maintenance houses that you were gonna set up some beds at Witten Center for critical
Yes.
needs. And that doesn't involve any need for any, I want to make sure that it's,
We have ample capital funds for, that's Rufus's second job, is to set that up. And we're gonna get through the first year, and we're gonna start the first quarter of next year. But we do have to do some capital improvements, mainly beds and stuff like that.
and on all the money that we've approved for the generators in the past, those are gonna be, what are we doing with that? We don't need any more money for any more generators. We got hurricane season starting next month.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure we prioritize health and safety with critical needs
Roger that.
and our power needs. So are we good there?
We're good there.
We're good there. So we have in every regional center.
We have the list of requests that the engineer's working on.
Okay,
We're good.
okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
I've got a question on the HVA system. Does that also include all the ductwork?
Which project?
For the HVA system replacement at the Coastal Center, $500,000. Does that also include is that going to replace all the ductwork?
It includes what needs to happen to make it a complete new system. It will either include cleaning the ductwork, if it's the correct size and in good condition, or it would include replacing it.
Okay. Do you know how old those dorms are?
The dorms are over 50 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would assume they're going to clean them, but I would like to know. They're going to either clean them or replace the ductwork.
It will be one or the other, yes.
Okay. And then on the roof, on the replacement on the roof,
yes.
Will the new roof be able to withstand, a hurricane or high winds of the coastal area?
It'll meet code requirements, yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have any other questions? I guess we need a motion on this. Have a motion to approve these 5 items.
So moved.
Got a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Good job.
Okay, David Fidel.
Morning.
Morning.
If you would turn to tab 4, I want to talk with you briefly about a report that Pat has developed that provides you a little bit more detail on 2 important areas of our operation. One being our critical needs list, and the other being our residential system capacity and vacancies. And I think Pat has shared with you a number of different reports that he has developed, which really give you a good snapshot of some really important system areas in terms of how they are progressing. And it gives you kind of a historical basis to see, are we going in the right direction or in the wrong direction? Or as Pat likes to say, are we winning or are we losing? This is the latest in one of those reports, and I think it will be very helpful to you going forward to just check and make sure that we are moving in the right direction. If you will look at the bottom half of this report, what that talks about is our critical needs list. And the critical needs list, which represents our way of approving individuals to receive residential services, which are our most expensive services, and people have to be in pretty dire situations before they're going to get approved to get residential services. Well, there are different circumstances as a result of people getting on the critical list, and what this does is it breaks that down into 4 different categories, where we've got individuals that are in need of immediate placement, people that are in jail or hospitals, people that have got significant behavioral needs, and then people that don't meet one of those other categories, that typically have pretty average needs. Usually they've got some family circumstances that require them to have out-of-home placement. But on the middle section there, that shows the average length of time from when one of the individuals in one of these categories gets put on the critical list to the time that they receive residential placement. And I guess the point I'd like to make most about that section of this chart is that the folks that have got the significant behavior needs are taking longer to place. They are really, our focus at this point in time. The other thing that I would kind of like to point out is, while there are 4 different categories, individuals in all the categories except the last one, the average behavior need, are typically individuals that have got some form of behavioral challenge. So even though we've got one category that's explicit to that, the individuals that end up in jails or hospitals, or oftentimes individuals that need immediate placement, also have some pretty significant behavioral needs. So that is kind of the common theme that we have in terms of characteristics of individuals that get on the critical needs list. If you go down from the middle of this section on the left-hand side, what this reflects is the number of people that have been placed out of each one of these 4 categories for each one of the last 5 quarters. And the point that I really want to make here is, even though individuals that have got behavioral needs comprise about 70% of the total individuals on the critical needs list, about 50% of the people placed had the significant behavioral needs. So our placements are not keeping up with the needs in terms of people that have got the significant behavioral needs. Now let's shift up to the upper half of this report. And this talks about our current residential system capacity and vacancies. And you can see that the majority of the residential services that we have are CTH2s. Those are 4-person, sometimes 3-person group homes. But I guess what I'd really like to focus your attention on is the vacancies in each of these different residential settings. And while we do have some vacancies, and while the average days vacant is about 167 days, total vacancies only represent a little less than 2% of our total bed capacity, which is pretty good. If you look at hospitals or motels, their vacancy capacity is much, much lower than that. So DSN works hard, and our providers, our provider partners work hard to try to make sure that those vacancies are used as quickly as possible to serve people off that critical needs list. But still, we've got challenges, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of we're not getting as many people that have got the significant needs placed timely off of the critical needs list. The other thing that I'd like to draw your attention to is if you go a little bit more towards the right on that upper section under the column that's headed state-funded beds, what that represents is residential services that we cannot draw Medicaid on because it does not meet qualifications that the Medicaid agency has established to pay for residential services. So we have to pay 100% state dollars to secure those services. And the consequence of that is for every person that we have to serve in a 100% state funded service, that is 2 other people that are not able to be served because we're not able to draw down Medicaid. And so it prevents us from being able to maximize our dollars to serve as many people as possible. Why do we use those 100% state funded beds? We use them because we don't have any other options. And it's 90% of the people that are in these 100% state funded beds have got significant behavioral needs. So we have to resort to them because we are not able to adequately address those individuals with significant behavioral needs through our other traditional residential options, not to the degree that we need to. I guess really the takeaway from this chart really is we've got an issue with people that have got behavioral needs. I mean, that's no surprise. We've talked about this a lot in the past, but I think that this chart does a good job of really putting it into black and white in terms of the degree of that problem. We have worked to try to come up with strategies to address that issue over the last couple of years. You all might remember that for the last 2 years when we've had new residential development money, We have restricted those funds to primarily go to services that are developed to support people that have got significant behavioral needs. During this last year, I think it was back in December, we sent out an invitation to our providers that don't specialize in serving people with significant behavioral needs to try to encourage them to do that. And we basically increased the rates that we would pay. Didn't get much of a response there. And then most recently, you'll remember at the last commission meeting, Pat talked about how we were going to establish kind of a triage capacity at two of our regional centers. And that is going to be intended to help our providers that say we want to serve people, our community providers that want to serve people with significant behavioral needs in the event that something bad happens. Because a lot of the feedback that we've gotten from our providers about why they're not real interested in supporting people with behavioral needs is because they feel like they don't have a backup. So we're trying to create that backup. So we've got some things in the works. I think that the initiative to provide better training to staff will help us, because I think the better trained our staff are, the better equipped they're going to be to support some of the very challenging needs of these folks. But we definitely have an issue here, and this is going to be something that we all are going to have to continue to work on going forward. So that's my report. Questions?
That presentation was very helpful, and this report is very helpful, so thank you for that. Under the state-funded beds, what specific Medicaid qualifications are these people not meeting?
Well, in the case of Correct Care is, it's a forensic facility, and so Medicaid will not cover that. It's not covered under any of the available reimbursement programs that Medicaid has established. So it's just not an option.
I don't know what that means. It's a forensic facility.
It primarily serves individuals that have had run-ins with the criminal justice system.
And the individuals don't meet the Medicaid qualifications, or the facility doesn't meet it?
The facility does not. The facility does not.
Okay.
David, is that the same thing as the old Just Care?
It sure is.
Okay, so
it
you
sure
changed the name. Just Care.
Correct.
It's a prison.
We like to say forensic, but
it's part of prison.
Thank you for speaking my language. And what about some of the others? Like if it's, the second one says CTH2, and CTH2s are...
We've got 2 CTH2s that are in settings that are highly restrictive to including fencing and being on kind of a campus-like setting, and really does not meet the requirements that Medicaid has established for the waiver. And particularly now that we've got the new HCBS final rule requirements, they definitely will not meet that. But these facilities, again, they're kind of a step down from Correct Care. The people that are in there are very aggressive, very violent. They will not fit in to our regular settings. They would pose a risk to the other people. We also a little bit concerned about making sure that there's a little bit of protection from the general neighborhoods. You know, we don't want to have problems. We don't want to be a bad neighbor. So it's not a prison, but it is very, very restrictive. So it is kind of our second level of service step down from Correct Care.
And
For those folks, are they judicially placed there? Are they judicial placements?
Yes, they will not go in there unless they've been judicially admitted.
Okay.
And this is a very elementary question, but are any of these settings or going through the heightened scrutiny under the final rule?
No, that has not started yet. That process has not started yet.
But it started in other states. I mean, I know some people going through it in Ohio.
Our state's not there yet. And again, it's just for waiver funded settings.
Okay. Yeah, that wasn't really related to this, but I just, nationally, what I'm hearing is that a lot of facilities that we think under the final rule, oh my gosh, you're going to have to shut down, that'll never pass muster. Once they go through that heightened scrutiny and they prove the reasons that it's okay, they're actually allowed to operate.
True.
So I just wondered where we are at that stage. And then one other question, can you give me, what are some examples of what it takes to get put on the critical needs waiting list?
Typically, we have individuals who have mom and dad or their primary caretaker unexpectedly die, so they don't have anybody to take care of them. We have individuals who may have been abused by their primary caretaker. We have individuals who are so aggressive that they pose a threat either to themselves, because some of our folks has very serious self-injurious behavior, or they pose a serious threat to their family members or to the neighborhood. So that's typically the kinds of situations that'll get somebody on the critical list. It's a serious situation. So and again, it's because our residential services are our most expensive services, and so we try to be judicious in who we allow in there. Because we have historically really focused our resources on supporting individuals to remain with their families.
Okay. And I'm still a little, I mean, the whole thing about, I do get that our vacancies is only 2% of our total bed capacity. And that's no more than a hotel, but there aren't, hundreds of people on the waiting list to get in the hotel. So I guess I'm interested in more information about why, some of these people on the waiting list, 117 people on the list.
Can't go into those vacancies.
Yes.
And you hit on one of those things earlier about that we're looking at facilities and all that, but the providers were concerned sometimes because they didn't have a backup. But one of their other main concerns is the lack of behavior support, psychiatric services that are available. And on that front, we're going to have to, we tried to do, we talked about telepsychiatry and maybe having nurse practitioners who are certified in mental health and having a centrally located psychiatrist do that. And I don't think we got that approved in the budget, did we?
I don't believe we did.
No. So now we're back to square one on our own. But one of the big hurdles that we've got to overcome is the lack of mental health services in especially these rural communities. That is the difference between what can be offered at Witten Center and what cannot be offered in Pickens County. And that is a barrier to the use of these 78 beds. So that is something that we've got to kind of
Good point.
Prioritize.
We have had actually quite a few meetings with the Department of Mental Health to try to get them to engage more with us and provide that. Those unfortunately have not been as successful as we might have liked. We do have a psychiatrist that works or is a contractor for DDSN, and we have increased the amount of time that he is spending. And while he does spend some of his time at a couple of our regional centers, we also have expanded his focus to include the community. Can't serve everybody, but that is an option that we have modestly grown in the last year.
Did you ask them specifically about that mental health and Duke Endowment venture that they're doing like $500 million for mental health services, and y'all were going to go back and approach them again? Did that bomb?
Yes, we did. And we tried to get plugged into their telepsychiatry, and they were kind of optimistic initially, but then they backed off.
They pulled off. So it may be that we need to get some legislative involvement in that, because, you hate to invite yourself to the party, but in this case, we don't have a choice. I think we crash it. We just go in there and try to see if we can get some help from downtown to make us a part of that initiative, because we need those mental health services. And it's always annoyed me to no end that people with developmental disabilities, why can't they be helped by mental health? Because there are people who have disabilities that also have mental health issues like there are in the so-called normal population. And there's a dual diagnosis there, and you get your door slammed in your face every time when you're in a rural county. And it's discriminating against our population. There's no other nice way to put it. So, I think we need to push harder to forge a relationship with mental health, because our people need access to mental health services. Just period. Now, if we're going to be on our own in providing those, then we need the funding that goes along with that responsibility, because you can't just say all these people that we're responsible for don't have mental health needs, so fund us for both of their needs, if we're not going to cooperate. But we really have to give providers the same resources that you have in the regional centers in terms of behavior support, psychiatric services, if you expect providers to provide those services. And I agree with you, Lori, there's 78 beds out there that are available. How can we access those beds?
And I'm curious, is there some statutory basis on which mental health says we don't have to serve your population?
I have never seen one.
No, there's not a statutory basis, it's just that usually when it comes to that, it's, oh, well, it's always overriding intellectual disability. So, we can't work with people that have an intellectual disability.
But their mission is to serve anybody with a mental health condition.
Right.
They prioritize.
They prioritize, yeah, exactly.
They don't have any
Same
beds,
thing,
so
every
they
state
dump them on them.
does, yeah.
Which is why the legislative committee, which I hopefully will not chair, needs to maybe take a look at that and see what we can do, because really, we need to do something. It's been going on for years.
It's crazy.
I think so.
It is crazy.
Well, it's just,
I'm sorry, Vicki.
I was just gonna say, it's just like if you're funded, by the prison system, you're also not gonna be funded by voc rehab, or, that's not really a good analogy, but it's like puts you in a hole, and this is where the funding's gonna come from to take care of you. But in this situation, mental health is such a huge barrier to life, life happiness for some of our people. And we just we're not the experts in that. But we can become experts if we need to.
David, are we aware of any federal grants or funding that the state hasn't tapped into to help pay for some of these services?
Not to the best of my knowledge. I mean, most of the grants unfortunately are pretty short term and they're like systems change grants. What we need is kind of more what Commissioner Thompson was talking about, is ongoing resources to hire more psychiatrists, more psychiatric nurse practitioners. And usually grants, they're kind of short term, they won't take care of that.
That would be a good start, because if you can improve outcomes and keep people out of jail and out of the hospitals,
We'll look into the federal side.
And building more facilities.
Yeah.
That are specific to high behavior needs. Yeah.
Anybody else?
More questions of David?
Thank you much.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Let me just jump on one thing here.
Okay.
The purpose of this is to do what it did, which is generate conversation so people can understand. And the more you understand, I think the more you can interpret it. So I'll give you my version of what's happening, because I think for us to get more money, and I heard it loud and clear from Chairman Ravenel, get more money. I mean, really, that's what it is. We have to be more persuasive. And we have to be, and we got to show, what this shows is, if I can interpret it, is you put this in front of people, and people who are really experienced can understand. Talking to the district directors, they said, like right now, we're 5 over at the regional centers. They've never seen that much overrun, and they always could absorb one more person. They can't absorb one more person. We're saturated. So the fallback position for our crisis, which has always seemed to have one more bed, doesn't happen. We have people in correct care who, if we had an available Medicaid bed, we could put in a Medicaid bed and get matching funds. But because they're in crisis, and they're not in the right position, and people can't take a certain diagnosis and a certain age and a certain gender, we have to put them in correct care. So the system is tight. And when I look at the system and understand the system, we need some level of working capital for choice. That 78, I don't know what the right number is, but the number is not 0. Somewhere in there, we got to have that capacity so that when people become available, half of them are male, half are female. So right away, the choice goes down. So what I see is we've been surviving off of the new beds coming into the system, and we have 21 left. And when they get snapped up here by the end of the summer, we're going to be back to that no more new beds. And if you look at these numbers, 67 to 70% of the people that come into our system have high needs. And where are they going to go?
And it's only going to go up.
It's only going to go up.
I mean, look at the new autism.
And this time next year, if we don't have something in place, you're going to have a big old number here, and we're going to, 40 people in correct care. I mean, it's going to. So I think we can make a strong case if we do 2 things. 1, we need more beds, but number 2, if we don't do everything we can, like Commissioner Thompson's recommending, of have the capacity to keep people out of regional centers, preferably keep them at home. If we don't have enough people who are addressing the ones that end up in crisis, I don't think we ever can fiscally build enough beds to keep ahead of the pace. we have to do something that you suggest and have enough capacity so that when a good-hearted provider takes a high-risk person and it doesn't work out, they have an option. And I think if we gave them options, I think all of a sudden you'd get more people be more willing to take the higher risk. So I think it's a combination of things, but it all starts with looking at this, and this is a very tight package with not much latitude that we got to start working on to build the latitude that we have and get more money so that we can keep enough lubrication in the system that we just don't have a crisis every Friday night.
So Pat, can you have the staff put together a proposal on the need and what kind of resources we need to solve this problem?
Yes.
Lori and I will go to Washington and we'll get with Senator Graham and Senator Scott and see if we can't get their help on the funding side.
We will, and I think when we do the abuse and neglect today, you'll see the other side of the equation, which is not we have the capacity issue, we have the direct care issue, and we have I think it's the higher acuity. If you have 70% of your people with high needs who've been coming in that way for 10 years, I mean, there was a period of time, and that's what David's so valuable. 10 years ago, the threshold was much lower. So that it was an even distribution. It wasn't as, now it's here and it's only going to get higher and it's going to become more challenging. We need better direct care. It's just all these factors are going in the wrong direction.
Right. Pat, could you just the 2018, 2019 budget update, please?
Just one second here. Been no change since last month. The legislature has ended its legislative session. They still have to reconcile the different chambers' budgets. Ideally, that's going to take place sometime in June before July 1st. But as far as our requests that have already been approved, there's been no change in that. The House has approved $11.3 million for our direct care and $500,000 for Greenwood, and the Senate did the same, and they added $500,000 for traumatic brain and spinal injury, and $300,000 for pest control in Haskell, and $400,000 for environmental modification. So nothing's changed. And I have expectation that we'll at least get what the House has, and hopefully more. Financial update in your package. If you can just skip over the cash one, we'll talk about cash flow in a second, and just go to the new chart that talks about reconciliation. Again, I think, like I talked about last time, our expenses are right in line where they are. Actually, we're 83% of the we have 16% of the year left, and we have 18% of our money. So from an expense side, we're fine. Now we get to the cash flow analysis, which is I talked about last month, and we talk about that a lot because we don't ever want to be negative. And of course, we have 3 new people driving the boat here with Tom Ritter and Lisa. At least they've been around a while, but in new positions, and myself. And I thank them for all the grinding we've done, because as you guys know, there's a lot of moving parts with revenue coming into our system, and the way people bill, we can have unexpected bills, so we're always kind of building contingencies. What I can report today is that with our projections, and our biggest risk is our June Medicaid revenue. And it's been coming in exactly where we want for the last 2 months. And if it comes in where we predict, which is $32 million, we will have a $2 million, 1.986 million positive cash flow. I assure that will go down only because expenses pop up out of nowhere. But if you want to cut it close, we're doing a good job this year. Now, from an ultimate fallback position, where I always think about is when we look, I talked about earlier, our capital accounts. We got $13.4 million of cash in our capital accounts. So we're not going to go negative. But at the same time, I don't want to burn through the 1.96. because getting access to that may not be as simple as we think it is, but we were confident we can get access to the cash there. So to answer your question, I don't see we're at risk. I think we're cutting it close. I think we have ample fallback position with the capital reserves, although you never really want to tap into your capital reserve. That's why they call them capital reserves. But fortunately, we do have some in there that we can reallocate to some other service. So I feel good at this point, Lisa. Okay, good. We're in it together now. All right. Any questions on the cash flow? And we'll know the Medicaid revenue number comes in June 19th, and that we'll know for sure then. And we'll keep monitoring. If something happens, we'll let you know. Quarterly quality management report. Normally Susan does this, and Ann, they're my backup. I'm doing it only because I just think it's the most important thing we're doing in order to get confidence. And I feel like I have to have hands-on to really understand it and help us gain the confidence and do what we need to do. So PowerPoint for you. First 4 slides, what we've done, what we decided to do. Sure. After we get that. Okay. What we've done is we've cut down the myriad of, and part of this, we're doing the abuse and neglect and exploitation program review, and we will do a report, but we're incorporating that as we go. And normally at the quarterly, you get a lot of data. And I concluded you're getting too much data, too many grains of sand. And so what I've decided to do was step back and say, look, let me give you really good trend analysis so that you can see what's going on over 5 years, so that we know if there is something there and we're not speculating. And I think the trends that we've been teasing out in the last couple of years are just escalating. Not crazy off the charts, but in the wrong direction. And I want to walk you through our analysis of them and how we collect. And then I'm going to take some time with another PowerPoint that I did this week, because we just got to agree on what the problem is, because part of the problem is it affects our payment system. And I think that will factor in my opinion, my recommendation is a big part of how we get better. First chart, this chart does 3 things. This is for community residential. I have another chart for regional centers, and I don't have a chart for day programs, because day programs has very low risk. I can put one up there if you want to see it. It's just that I want to keep my eye on community residential, because that's where our risk is at. It does 3 things. It shows you the vertical bars are the abuse and neglect allegations, and you can see they're going up over the last 5 years. And that last one on the right is just the average. And then the other 2 important factors, which, just because you have an allegation doesn't mean there's a problem, it just means it's something. But now we have the outcomes. This outcome here is what we call administrative substantiated findings. Non-criminal, raised your voice, cussed, those type of personnel performance issues that the ombudsman comes, does an investigation, makes a conclusion. And over the last 5 years, the red dot is that's the what do you call that? Incremental pattern. That's the average. And what you're seeing here is our average is steady over the last 5 years. I don't want to say it's good. All I'm saying is it's not teasing up. Well, our outcomes correlate with on a steady straight line, so I don't see an increase or decrease. Arrests have been about 7 a year, a little bit more variations, low 4, high 10, and right now we're on track of having 11 this year. So we have 10 right now, but when you annualize it, it could be 11. So this is a high year. We're on the high end of our known arrests. So that's what that chart tells me, is the arrests are certainly clicking up this year. The allegations are clicking up, and substantiated allegations are flat. And when you compare it to the regional centers are just flat. We had a little tick up in the allegations, now we're ticking down. And if you look over the last 5 years, you can draw a straight line through the 5 years. You look at the substantiated administrative allegations, it looks a lot like communities. straight line, steady pattern. And if you look at the arrests, very nominal arrests, 1, 2, 2, 1, average 1 a year. I look at the regional centers, it looks like it's doing the same thing in and out every year. And I think it's good to think about that, because when you compare it to the community, it's going up. As we get to the other numbers, you'll see it going up. And I'm saying it's not going up by, large margins, but it's going up and it's continuing to go up. Here we put everything of the death reporting and critical incidents on one chart. Reporting was was one that we worked on for the last week. And you have a number in your report that is actually wrong. And once we figured that out this morning, I feel better. What we have on the death reporting is we have 4 years of steady 68, 59, 65, 63. I call that just, kind of, there's a little random variation in there, and it doesn't whack me out. Okay, last year we went up to 78. We had a 22% increase in 1 year. That's a problem. That doesn't mean anything unusual is happening. I mean, it doesn't mean there's anything other than, natural deaths, but it means something. And then this year, we were tracking it, and halfway through the year, we're looking high. And then 3/4 through the year, we did some extrapolation, and we're still high. So we were beating on that number for poor Ann. I think she's been trying to satisfy me for a week here. And we finally figured out that basically we had an extrapolation issue. So this year's average, actually, we're sitting on 68 now, and given 6 weeks left, 7 weeks left, we should expect 73. But at the end of the day, we bubbled up, and the burden on us is like, what's going on there? And our best evidence, what we did to look at the 78 was, we looked at everybody that was up that year, and there were 5 that were up. We talked to the providers, and for the providers, very similar. It's like, look, aging population, more fragile, is probably going to go up, but they couldn't articulate a reason. And they're going up. Doesn't mean anything abnormal. It just means it went up that year, because we have others that went down. It's called random fluctuations. But overall, you still have to account for why you went up 22%. One provider was able to say they put in an 8-bed ICF that was high-end medical capabilities. And they did it so that they could provide hospice for their consumers within their provider network. So in 16, they had 1 hospice death, and in 17, they had 5. So right away, there's something going on there that accounts for 4 or 5 of them. And they went from 5 to 10 in 1 year. Beds went up enough for a percentage, a 1.6% increase, so that was 1. So we've accounted for about, I would say, 5 or 6 of the 14 that went up. Okay, well now the big question is, if we keep on going up, we'd still be in there looking. We've gone down this year. We should be at 73, which means, okay, maybe that says last year was more of an anomaly. And at 73, if I factor in those 4 or 5 beds from this provider with a new ICF, I'm right back in the 68, 67 range. So my point is that anecdotally, providers are feeling that populations are becoming more fragile and older. It's really not showing up dramatically in the numbers. It may have spiked up a little bit, but I'm satisfied. 78, we can account for about half of it, and the other half I can't account for. The only thing I can account for is every death we have in the system. We have a DDSN doctor that reviews the reports. And we send them across the street for an independent review by the SLED-led
Total adult fatality review.
and we get reports. And one of our challenges is to get accurate reports quickly. And most recent year was, and this is both regional centers and community. There were like 87 deaths, and we had 3 that were not natural. One was a person went home on family leave and was murdered at their residence outside of our care. Another person died of choking. That was accidental, and they were 82, 83. And another person died in correct care, which is still under investigation. So, but all the other ones were natural. So what I'm saying is, we had 2 sets of eyes saying they're natural, we see a trend. The fact that I can't account for those 6 doesn't drive me the distraction, and the fact that we went down makes me feel better. So that's the grinding that we're doing to give you some confidence that we're trying to understand what's going on out there. Critical incidents, we'll quickly get rid of this pre-18 methodology, because what we did at the beginning of 18, we changed the methodology and we pulled out some of the ones that were not critical, lower the numbers. So Dan went back and looked at every year and pulled out the same critical incidents so that we can compare apples to apples. So under the new methodology, it's just a different number, but it's the same pattern going up. We were at 10% critical incidents last year, both in the centers and in the community. So when you look at all the indicators from a trend, I'm leaving deaths alone because I got two sets of doctors say they were all natural. So I'm not concerned about it going up for 1 year. Critical incidents up, arrests are up, allegations are up. So we'll leave it there. All right. This is what I think. And I've run by some providers, and I think the staff is pretty comfortable with it. I some head nodding, and it's good. There's something driving what's going on. I would say if one thing's driving it, the number one factor in my mind is what Dave just gave me. 67% of people that come into our system have high needs. Not only high needs, I add in the anecdotal data that we pick up all the time. We were up in Greenville, Commissioner Neely, we met with some EDs, and I didn't appreciate it, but I do now. The way they articulated the mental health dual diagnosis, I knew it was a factor. I just didn't feel it's a factor. It's real, and their conclusion is basically mental health. They have a mission too. They just don't have the facilities we do. So when they have somebody dual diagnosed, their only choice is to place them in a CRCF. That's what they do with their residential people, which is not a good situation. So almost by the fact that we have a good, historical, robust residential program, we are serving those consumers that, again, add that little extra high-need capabilities to the system. It's been going on for 10 years. And we turn over about 250 a year, so you can see how the system's distribution is changing over time. And I think that is a factor. Nothing inclusion, but that's a big one in my mind. Direct support professional. I'll send you guys a link to the best report I've read in my time here. It's from the Presidential Commission on people with intellectual disabilities. We have a chairman right here. Although it had nothing to do with this report, he took full credit. It's a fabulous report. It talks about the dynamics of the direct care worker in our system, and it doesn't put lipstick on the issue. It really talks about the nitty-gritty consequences of turnover, retainage, the stress, the staffing levels, the supervision. And what I got here, and most people agree, to be a good direct care worker, you have to be an all-around athlete. You've got to have, you got to be the nurse, the teacher, the psychologist. That's what rehabilitation is. It is not assisted living. It is rehabilitation. And that rehabilitation skill, sometimes we take it for granted. And I have not been out there as much as you, but you walk into a house and you can tell when that direct care worker has it. You see the leadership, you see the trust. You walk in other houses, you don't see it. And that is something that we always try to strive for, the providers strive for, but at the same time, these are the factors we're dealing with. Physically demanding job, high stress, 24/7, overtime, high individual accountability. You make a mistake other place, you get fired. You make a mistake here, you're tagged with a felony that could ruin your employment life for the rest of your career. Really, it's tough. And the one thing that comes out loud and clear, we attract the people who love the job. And if it wasn't for them, we would be in grave danger. And what I urge all of us to think about is we are really living off their shoulders and their goodwill, because they are sticking in there under pretty tough circumstances. We've seen this before, average wage. Hey, we get what Walmart gets and Lowe's gets and Best Buy. Yet the expectations of the job are that. That's like a teacher. And I just can't imagine at my age, at 23, 24, that I'd be responsible for 4 human beings. I couldn't do it. I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I would do it.
Is that average wage starting, is that South Carolina specific?
This, I guess South Carolina next. So this is national wages. South Carolina is $11 today. So we're not out of the norm, but we still have, we still have incredible turnover. This is a national number, 44.8% turnover nationally. And this chart here is a little funky, but the point, what they're trying to say is a lot of our employees are less than a year. So you may have 65% stable workforce and 44% turnover because this little third over here turned over 3 times more in 1 year.
Pat, one of the questions that came up last week was whether or not the direct care workers had to participate in the state retirement system. And did y'all find out the answer on that? I mean, are we mandated to do that? Because that's 9% that could be put back into their pay.
The answer to the question is, if I come in the system, I can get a 401k. And they match my 401k, but I still have to contribute 4 or 5%.
But for somebody that's.
What?
It's the same percentage. Employees pay the
Yeah,
same.
9%.
If you're a state employee, you pay it, yeah.
State employees pay 9%.
Yeah, yeah.
So I hear what you're saying. We got more cash.
But still, it's IRA money locked away. It's just, we'll check on that.
Right.
The question is, can they decline?
Can they
being part of
decline?
the-
Yes, and then we could then pay them.
No.
They
State
can't
employees are
decline.
not allowed
You
to.
can't decline the state.
Not if
the
you
state
cannot.
retirement.
You have to take.
Because that's 9% that's taken out of their pay, and that makes the burden even harder. And then you place the final rule on top of that, and the greater burden we're gonna have. I mean, we're gonna have even a harder time when it comes to retention, recruitment. I mean.
But I think the state, having state retirement is a plus for a lot of people.
Yeah, but for a lot of these people, they might not stay with state government for 25 years. They're just trying to live from week to week.
Yeah, it's true.
I think the answer.
I'm just looking for a way, how can we reinvest back into them? And if they don't have to be part of the state retirement plan and they opt out, then it seems to me like we should reinvest that back into their hourly rate and pay them more.
Hey, everything's on the table.
Am I wrong?
But apparently they can't opt.
Yeah, they can't opt out.
Well,
I think they're looking at redoing the retirement system,
The
but that
retirement
didn't
system,
happen.
the whole state is required.
Yeah, the whole state employees.
For hourly.
That would only be for the state employee.
Yeah, state employee.
State funded for all these community settings.
I think at one point, the provider communities had an option to opt out, and those many.
Would never be involved, not all of them elected to join, but I believe once you elect to join, you're locked in.
Once a business entity elects to join,
Once
an
one of our
individual.
county DSN boards, which
Oh,
have the
county
ability
board.
to participate in the state retirement system, once they make that decision
Got
to do
it.
it. I think several tried to get out, and may have been told.
Slapped, okay.
Yeah, it's not a
So you've got county boards that may or may not be, but probably are. You've got the state system that they're in, and then you've got the community.
Which are not, they're
They
not
have
allowed
their,
to.
right,
Yeah.
But yet they can go to Walmart and make more per hour and they're not forced in any kind of retirement program if they so choose.
Correct.
DJJ, DSS, Department of Corrections face the same issue. It's a state issue. And we have a lot of entry-level people that we pay less than the demands of their job, and that's what we're getting some of the outcomes we get. South Carolina, there was a survey last year by NCI. Turnover rate for the state providers was 37%. And our regional centers, as of last month, was 45%. The advantage of South Carolina in the study was they asked about your workforce that was greater than a year. The national average was about 65% in this study, and we're about 75%. And I would attribute that to our pension keeps people in longer. So there is, once we got them hooked, I think it's a little bit better for us. And my own unofficial talking to providers, it varies. You may go to some places that are uniquely situated. I think your county's pretty situated, right? You're near a metropolitan area, but you still have a rural feel. They may have it low. You go to Greenville, very high, because they're in the metropolitan area. So it just depends, but 37% resonates with me as a reasonable number. The survey I did last fall with the providers, 67% reported that they didn't have enough direct care staff on the floor. If you go to providers, they work 3 shifts. And they are faced with not enough people. So you may ideally want to have somebody people on second shift, because when we pay an H-band, that's $350,000 a year. There's sufficient money in the system. The problem is, can we get someone to fill that extra spot? Or how much overtime do we have to pay? I would say it's not unusual that we are living with staffing levels of 1 or all 3 shifts because we have to, because we can't get anybody or the overtime. So at the end of the day, I know why they feel short, because acuities are going up and people are going down. This came from that same presidential commission, was a quote, and I believe it's 110% for the state, because I've focused on this issue and I have not had a lot of luck with anybody having a robust first-line supervisory staff. Supervisors spend a large percentage of their time working shifts. They're doing very little personnel supervision. I don't put them in a spot, but nobody disagree. Your first-line supervisors are being sucked into the fight, and they can't do their job. And to me, if you have good first-line supervisors, it solves all your problems. We have no first-line supervisors. So you wonder why we have arrests are at 10. And I'll send you a little synopsis of the arrests. We are not letting predators among us. We are hiring people who we're competing with entry-level jobs. We're giving them expectations beyond their capabilities. We're understaffing them with high acuity. They're reactionary things. There's 1 or 2 that are like, I can't believe that happened. But there's 7 or 8 that are just stupid. But they're still happening. So I don't want to apologize for them, but it's not like we are people are getting through our screening processes with a nefarious background. These are just people put in high stress situations and they're reacting to all situations.
So on that supervisor thing, I know that in Oconee County, they've talked about a supervisory class. You know, the direct care work thing, of course, comes first. But the next thing, I think, Jerry Mize back there, would be the supervisory, because they're not trained to be managers necessarily. They've had no supervisory training, and that contributes to the high turnover because they've had no screening and interviewing skills, training. They've had no, any of the management type things that you have to do. How to deal with difficult situations or progressive disciplinary action or any of those things. So that's going to be a very critical part to the turnover that has not yet been addressed.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to it. So I want to put all this in one bucket. I'm trying to say, how will we explain this to a legislator? What's going on? And this is the way I describe it. We have a gap between direct care workers' capacity, numbers, and capabilities, training and experience going down. And we have a population whose needs are going up. And it took me a while to figure out, being a new person here, if someone has higher needs, how much harder is it? Who wants to get the next way? It ain't twice as hard, is it? It's a lot more demanding. And if you have good skills, you may be able to mitigate that, prevent it. But if you are fresh off the street with 2 months experience and you're 19 years old with a GED and you're dealing with very challenging situations, what do? You revert to command and control. That's what you do. It all goes together. So I'm looking at this as a gap of capabilities and increased behavioral needs that is widening. We've seen it. I sat here 2 years ago and I saw Vicki seeing the little roots pop up, and they're bigger roots now. And so what are we going to do? And this is what what I would advocate as we move into the payment system is, and this may be a little, I think you have to get it. I don't think we can not get it and move forward. What other states do, the best practices for other states to address the health and safety welfare in systems is they build a payment system that your direct care staff on the floor is directly tied to what we pay you based on the acuity of your person. There's been some talk about some providers don't want to take high acuity people. If I'm standing in their shoes and I'm getting the same money for both,
Why would you?
and I have to make payroll, I can't begrudge that. I can't. I mean, there's a legitimate issue there, because we have not built the payment system to match their acuity. Other states have done that. Other states will build, I'll show you the chart in a minute. Other states build first-line supervisors into the rate. You will have one supervisor per 4 houses. And it will not be a guy that runs for groceries. It will not be a guy doing the shifts. You are leading a staff. Each house probably has 7 or 8 people. That's 24 people you're leading and developing. And they build it into the rate. And then nursing ratios. I think that's the hidden or subtle issue that's floating around out there. I think nursing is just, we're not talking about it because direct care so bad. How about the nursing staffing levels out there?
Horrible.
Horrible. Okay, so if we think it's part of the system, we got to build it in. And then like the transportation and overhead dollars, same thing. Figure out, do a good rate study, build a fair rate. What we do in South Carolina, and our system, the band system has some great capabilities. Its biggest weakness is we really set no standards. And we really haven't built an actuarial basis behind it. Like, I'm giving you this hunk of money so that you have 1 supervisor, 1 nurse, and 2.2 people, and this amount of overhead. Ours is built on 1998 cost analysis that we've incrementally adjusted for 18 years. Now, I believe it's been pretty close, but it's been eroding since the recession. And so now all of a sudden we're the lobster in the pot. We just keep on shit, but it's boiling and we don't even know it. And so what the providers have to deal with is, I got a fixed amount of capitated money and I got these needs and I got to make it work. So what happens? You keep on shaving here, you shave there. And so when you say, what are your staffing levels? I think it's one, absent a crisis. And it's because if you don't have an expectation, it's easy to put money elsewhere. And we have not done our job to do the math to see what they need. We defer to them. And you have 50 residential providers out there. They're all not the same. Some may be able to make more out of a dollar than the next person, or they may have higher priorities. I think we as a state have to decide, what's the staffing level, what's the supervisor level, what's the nurse staffing level? Because if we do those 3 things, the health and safety welfare issues will go out of the system, because you have proper supervision, you have proper staffing. And in my opinion, why you have problems in the residential community and you don't have them in the regional center, because in your regional center, guess what? You got people around. You got peers around. These poor direct care workers are in houses by themselves for 8 hours. And I think that's all that contributes to the stress we're seeing. And the last thing, that's me, invest in training and compensate first-line supervisors. That just comes from my background. I'm a 100% believer. If you got strong first-line supervisors, everybody said it starts at the top, that's good. But give me 5 supervisors versus 1 executive director any other week. And we don't train them and pay them. We can send our guys all the training we want. They're going to get out there, be it by themselves, and they're going to revert to spraying bottles, get in control. You got to have supervisors to train them on the job. This is way too small for you guys. You have your binder. Yeah. And I'm going to just give you an idea. This is what other states are doing. When they build a rate, there's a lot of things that go into the rate, and I highlight it just to match what I'm saying. This is a residential 4 or fewer beds. They're generally 4, 4, and 3. And there's another appendix that goes with this that makes the math on the hours work. But you can see the gist of it is, based on your acuity, that's the hours you get for staffing a week. A low house gets 162, medium house 183, and a high support gets 225. And that generally equates to, low support is 1 per shift, medium support gives you 3 extra hours a day, I presume, on second shift, and high support is 8 hours extra a day, which I presume is second shift. 1 supervisor for 4 homes, 1 nurse per 20 people. Everybody is doing it because what they have learned, if you don't do it, resources will slip to things that are easier rather than harder. Because here, when you bill here, you don't get your overhead money until you have people on the floor. So if you're short staffing, you're short your overhead. It's a motivator to make sure you're staffed adequately. I don't want to all be doom and gloom, because all the things I said, I think it's showing up at the margin, but it's increasing. Any provider want to help a brother out here? Is that fair? It's just, sooner or later, we got to turn the curve. And our point is, we don't turn the curve, and here comes the payment system, now the time to turn the curve. I've talked about this tool before, but I want to reinforce it again, because if I'm sitting in your chair, you should be on my back to get this done. Because this gives you confidence things are working. And that is, it's called the residential observations. This is something that is very, there's objective criteria, but human beings make the determination. And if I'm a provider, I want to make sure the person who's looking at my shop has enough capabilities to discern my performance. And so I've given the providers assurance, this is all developmental until we get to a point where we're confident. And once we get going, I'm not going to do this job, but I hope when we're around, I will urge that we hire a retired executive director that everybody respects to be the person who will consult on this to make sure that we're trained and that we have good outcomes. Because this is going to give us the assurance that habilitation is going on and our people are safe. And we will do 250 a year. And I would say in 6 months, we should be able to give you, or next month, we should be able to give you a report that said we went to 63 houses the last quarter, and this is what we found. And if I'm you, I'm looking at the safety line. And we went to 49 houses so far, interview consumer and staff. They're not talking about unsafe conditions out there. They're not talking about fear. That's all good. We found a couple of safety issues. One was an over-medicated consumer, which turned out not to be true. And another one where we had a one-on-one direct care who was completely clueless as to what the issues were. So my point is, as we're reconstituting some of the things that are causing the noise, I think we can put our head on a pillow at night knowing that we're going into 60 residential homes every quarter, and you will have a report as to the safety going on out there. So we will not have to tease out abuse and neglect data, and we can get back to trend on abuse and neglect data. Conclusion, we're not in a crisis, but we are not, every other state's doing the same thing. We're all in the same boat. I'd argue we're probably better than most because of our pension systems, and we have high pay for a rural state. But look at us, what is everybody else doing? And our issues are not a function of abuse. We'll have some recommendation on abuse and neglect policies to improve them. We don't have any gaping holes in our system. What we have is capabilities of direct care workers and a higher acuity of consumers, and we got to close that gap. So when we look at it, that's what I'm looking at. And actually, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you guys have been itching about it for years. Does this meet your model of the world, Vicki?
Are the quality residential observation visits, are they announced?
No, unannounced.
Better, and you check staffing ratios.
It's hard to check a staffing ratio when there's no standard. We're going to collect on that, but you can't hold anybody accountable if there's no standard. We can say, hey, it's a high acuity house, you have to have more people on the floor, but the provider will say, look, I have no standards and I have no money.
Well, you have minimum standards.
One.
Yeah. Gotta have. I mean, I think it's very exciting to have a quarterly quality report where people have been out and looked.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's a huge step in the right direction. It's going to be important that you gather the right risk management information, in order to make improvements.
Yes.
While you're out there, so that we can course correct when we find things. And is this going to be in any way tied into performance measurements on the
I think once we have it validated by a former executive director that they trust, then all of a sudden you have your contract scores, which is like you need to get above 70. These scores are not 1 through 10. It's not pass fail. It's more along the line of, is it present? Is it partially present, or is it not present? So it gives you an indication of feedback. At what future point do we fix that as a performance measure of which we take consequential action that is downrange? And I wouldn't even want to try to guess that, because if the program isn't accepted and developed at a high level, we'll just be arguing about the results.
So, I mean, I guess if, not to belabor this, but if looking for some characteristic person to do it. I wouldn't be real sold on an executive director necessarily, because a good QA coordinator who's able to evaluate might be somebody who can, you know, just look at and talk to and interview and say, okay, our policy is to do this, and then interview staff and say, what is your policy on this? And see if anybody's been, knows. See if anybody's been trained in that policy. That kind of thing is gonna come a lot of times from a good QA person. That's just an opinion, but it's a really good, it's a milestone. It really is.
And the thing that we haven't built yet, and we're not gonna build for a little bit, is not, you can't just develop everybody into success. Sometimes people have to fail. And so this residential observation by Alliant people, it's gonna be very relevant, but if they see something, and we'll decide what it is, but if they determine a house is at risk for health, safety, and welfare, they will call in, and they will call David or Rufus, and we'll have 2 people on standby that will go to the house within a day and do what I would call a subject matter expert review. Because if you send somebody in there with the credibility of a field person like a Rufus and bring in some behavioral person, and they go in, they say, this house has failed, I think then we have to treat that house differently. We have to go back through the provider and fix management accountability as that, why didn't you know, or did you know and not do anything? Because until we get there, we're gonna go out and fix it up and whack it. And so I think we don't wanna have a negative environment, but there has to be a point for which you fail. And Alliant's not gonna make that call. We'll make that call after they flag it for us.
Pat, can I ask one more question? Just on the unannounced observations. I guess this is a piece of litigation that's been going on for a few years, but really it's just coming to my attention. I'm curious why we're litigating to prevent P&A from going in to do the unannounced medical inspection, the medical administration to view the record.
I think it's a privacy issue, Tanner.
It was a HIPAA issue.
It's a HIPAA.
So I haven't looked into this, but speaking as a parent, I wonder if we're weighing and balancing HIPAA, if we're putting too much weight on HIPAA as opposed to, I'd like to have P&A or anybody else come in and inspect my son's medical administration.
And the issue was, we were gonna say, go ask the family.
Yeah.
Go ask the family to give permission
Okay.
to look at your son's medical records.
The family can always do it.
And what? And what was the response
They
to?
didn't wanna do that.
They wouldn't do it.
Wouldn't ask the family.
No.
Okay.
They just wanted.
HIPAA.
Yeah.
And we were, well, the case is over now because the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it went to the Supreme Court.
I know it did. I just,
They
you know,
denied, they said cert was improperly granted, so.
as a provider, I would welcome more people observing to make sure that what I think is happening is actually what's happening in the home. And if that's part of P&A's charter to do that.
Well, that's the issue. We didn't think it was according to their statute, and the Court of Appeals agreed with us. They have more authority if it's a complaint, but not just their team advocacy.
You know, it seems like to me that the best providers with the lowest A&E rates, Pat, seem to be the ones with their own internal QA person. A lot of times, if you'll look closely, the ones with the lowest rate of A&E and the top quality have their own internal QA programs. I don't know if that's a requirement or if it's a standard or what the requirements are, but a good, robust internal QA program. Because when I was a provider, the way I stopped working is I would show up and say, show me the cash box, show me the receipts, unannounced.
Supervision.
That too, but you know, there were certain things that you look at, and you know where your weaknesses are as a provider, you know where your liability is. So you build your own internal program around that, and a lot of providers have that. Most of them, I would think, do.
Okay.
So I mean, they all need to have that as a requirement. If they have a QA program, QA and risk management, quarterly meeting, things are addressed,
incidents or, most of them have that.
I think they all do it. The question is, who does it with a robust nature versus maybe a less robust nature? But
Yeah.
I think there is no silver bullet here, but I think it does start with having a good team on the field with good standards and good supervision. And I think the measuring really does help. I believe that is
Get the results.
Get the results you act. I got one small issue left, and that is a late arrival to the program, which is we have a DOT grant that they will provide us a $64,000, $706 ADA minivan, and we have to pay a $9,706 match. Seems like a really good deal to go forward with that transaction.
Any other questions about it?
To be used for what? What is the vehicle to be used for?
Regional centers.
It's for regional centers. It's a regional centers.
Okay.
Yeah. Do I have a,
We've received several of these grants in the past.
yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Great, thank you. That ends our meeting, and our next regular meeting will be June 21st, 2018. Thank y'all all so much.
Thank you.